I just wanted to do something different because I figured out something recently that's really kind of effective. I wanted to make a freestyle speech on it, basically. Sort of inspire people, give hope, or whatever. To define what a freestyle speech is, I just made it up. I don't know if it exists. It's when you just make up a speech on the spot. Pretty much how I define it. And the speech is about what I'd call true mental health support. It's basically the best advice you'll probably ever hear, to be honest. Even I think on it and how to improve it, and I can't. So, without further ado, let's go into it. So, obviously, this starts with a story. And the story is that around 2022, when I was interacting with people after my mental breakdown that happened in April, not long after my birthday, I realised I needed friends and I needed people to talk to. Because I was really struggling at the time, I was spilling suicidal thoughts. I wanted to get out of the house because it was so noisy. It was just hell, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So after that, I got into contact with people online and began to pretty much have a social life. I joined Discord groups of people with similar interests, and unfortunately, my hyperfixation started when I was hyperfixating on losing my virginity. And for anyone unaware, hyperfixation's a trait of autism where you just can't stop fixating. And it's like there passively, even without realising. It's quite nasty sometimes, depending on what it is. And this created issues for many reasons. It was disruptive to my workflow, how I do things productively. And it was possibly hurting people as well, because I was going up to them saying, well, I'm a virgin, I need help. And they just weren't helping, which also doesn't help with fixations. Because when the thing you want isn't being met, it's just, you just can't do anything. And I don't even know if you can prevent hyperfixation by getting the solution. So, while that was happening, I was making as many friends as I can. People fortunately do like me outside of these issues, and people need to give me a chance. Other people in my situation, to be honest. Because it is damaging to basically not want to know somebody just because of a disability. We're still people at the end of the day. That's important to acknowledge, and one of the steps that I took to become more accepting of disability and understand it is one, dropping judgment. So as in, you just stop having judgment altogether. And two, you get to know people. And the way I got to know people in an online situation is looking at my past, where even in a mainstream school I knew people who are like physically disabled and mentally disabled, and even our school was next door to a special needs school. So I learnt through that as well. But the other thing that helped is basically a YouTube channel called Special Books by Special Kids. It taught me so much about mental health and just disability in general, and how we should be accepting of it and kind to people with it. Because we're not all played fair hands, really. Sometimes we play really shitty hands and maybe don't even live to tell the tale. But that's especially possible for people who are neurodivergent, because we have a rare trait where we just overthink. And that's how I've actually come to this conclusion in this speech. Because sometimes you can overthink in a good way, but other times you overthink in destructive ways, and that's also why I'm actually still struggling. But there is something that I know that helps others, and actually so much so that people say I'm a good counsellor, which is really interesting and also really flattering. After the story, I was making many friends, and eventually dramas began happening, not between us, but the servers we were in. And this created some issues, to be fair, but not massive issues. Just things that we wish didn't exist. And it was kind of disheartening as well, because some of the people who were in these dramas were decent people. And eventually one of them sort of hurt me, which is rare, because I've got a pretty tough skin. But they just sort of hurt me with the words they were saying. It just got to me really, and I realised I'm really fucking alone. Eventually they apologised to me, but at that point I just didn't feel up to making up for that. And I just left it at that. I started to stay alone again, shut myself off from everyone. But during that I actually realised something. There was something that I was actually good at. I was good at helping people. The interesting thing about that was that I give people a chance. So for example, one of the servers I met, one really good friend of mine in the US, just by DMing him. Because I think for at least, I hate to generalise, but cis male people tend to get a lot of flack, I guess, and get ignored by people. So I gave them a chance. Every single man that joined the server, I gave them a chance. And I even met a nice trans man through this as well. He's an awesome artist. And what was great about this experience was that I met people who, like me, struggle. They have these down times, and it's just good to be able to help people and also prevent some of their suffering. And that's where I realised I was actually somewhat decent at calming people down. Just that my advice hits the spots that need to be hit. And that was before I even developed basically what I've come to realise today. I've come to know. Let's skip to a few months ago. I finally got out of my crappy situation and moved to a quiet place. I could finally live in peace and also die happy because I got to be somewhere that wasn't agonising to be around. I was living next to a train station / main road, and it was where the train stopped. Yeah. So you can probably imagine how bad it was. I prefer living on a highway than there. And I think both are equally bad, but with living next to a train station, you get the noise of the trains. They beep their horns sometimes, whatever they do, honk or whatever. And another thing with that is with the road, cars queue up, traffic just builds up. It constantly builds up because of the shitty design of the road. It could have been widened actually. There could have been improvements, it could have been even a tunnel, but they didn't. So what ended up happening was cars that were playing loud music got stuck there for ages. Cars with loud engines and bikes would be stuck there for ages as well, and when they fucking revved, it just hurt your ears. And for me with sensory issues, it's a complete nightmare. Unfortunately, I didn't know the advice back then, so I essentially had no way of coping. I was on the verge of suicide, I was planning it, I was just trying to find any way to cope. And no rescue came, which also leads into my fear of not being rescued, which came from childhood trauma of being physically abused by my father. So eventually I moved, and suddenly my mental health got much better. And this confirmed to me that true mental health support, it goes by addressing the source. And the trivialised version of it, sadly, is not helpful. People say go to GP, call this number. Hell, even some suggest go to 999 or A&E, which I have done recently actually because of another issue I have, and they can't help. They don't help with these issues. Which sucked because I spent over 4 hours just trying to get this tackled. They just told me there's nothing they can do, and that's traumatising to me. I'm actually going to need therapy for that, because to be told that in a desperate situation is not good. Already with the fear that I have. And it's actually one of the only fears I have, which is strange, because I don't have many fears. But back to the point at hand, I'm still getting to know people, and one of the things that I have to teach myself with getting out and about, trying to meet people and change my life for the better, is that mental health issues are not easy to tackle, but they can be. And this is where my solid piece of advice came from, and I actually want it inscribed on a bracelet so I can wear it and remind myself of it. It's how I tackle most of the things that we hesitate, most of the things that hurt us. Just these simple words of advice even. It's the only thing I've written down actually. Don't give issues the gratification they want. And that means what it sounds like. First identify the issue. Next learn what gratification it wants. Like if it's anxiety, it wants you to panic. It wants you to not go into things. And in some cases it can be right. But when you know that that's the intent of anxiety, you can avoid it. You can just overpower it by thinking, oh, it's not real. Just giving it what it wants doesn't help you, or it doesn't help anyone. So you can just completely destroy it. Although it comes back, it's a strategy that you can use to cope. I recently went for a colonoscopy, and I sort of used this sort of technique, and it sort of helped. I was still nervous as hell, but I managed it. Got diagnosed with colitis. I can't say it. And that was that really. I've got on medication for it now, but yeah. And as much as it sucks, you do sometimes have to, I guess, be an alpha or even the strongest in order to tackle these issues. And then recently with a friend that I know in real life that I've actually met only once though, I've given her the same advice about, I forgot it, damn it. Yeah, don't give issues the gratification they want. I basically said something along those lines and also gave a few extra tips. Because I think it was to do with anxiety. Basically I said like, try to divert the thoughts and overstimulate basically. This goes for chronic pain as well. Like if you overstimulate chronic pain and don't give it the gratification it wants, I think you can easily tackle it. Other than anal fissure and hemorrhoids at the same time, it's agony. I don't wish it on anyone. Not sure if I'd rather have long COVID to be honest, but it's just equally bad. And that's really how you tackle mental health. You just don't give it the gratification it wants. And there's an extra bit to this because these words of advice are interesting because they don't just apply to mental health. They apply to people. They apply to words, actions, you name it. There's a lot of things in life that are scary, and I think it's only really scary and justifiable to be scared when its intent is to harm. But even then, you need to try and fight back. This is one of the rare things that I think in a low mood state can actually help. Because when you fight back, you basically win. You become your true self. And it isn't necessarily healthy to do it for everything. Because, for example, if someone wants to offer me, say, food, say it's a vegan burger or something, I can get it for free. They might be doing it to hurt me. I don't know. Do I give them gratification of hurting me? No. So I do it. And if they do end up hurting me, then so what? If they give me the wrong burger, like, who cares? Obviously the animals care, but the point is that the intent was to harm you, and if you can recognise that, it just won't matter. It won't bother you. So yeah, you need to fight back, unfortunately. But that's also where I bring in the next piece of advice, because again, I think I adapt, I evolve, that's what I do. If for some reason you can't help yourself, ask others for help. There's no shame in it. And people have tried to shame me for this my whole life because I went to a mainstream school and I had teaching assistants to help me. And that was mainly for writing, I think, but also just keeping me sort of focused, I guess. And people have tried to shame me for that, but at the end of the day, it was necessary that I got help. And again, the point with shaming is that you need to look at the intent. Like, why are they shaming you? Are they right or wrong? Well, because of circumstances that I can't help, they're in the wrong. I'm not. I can't control the. I have global learning delays. Nobody can. So I'm not going to give the gratification that people want from shaming me for having help. And the same goes for mental health. And actually, the same goes for my situation, actually. Because people complain that I'm not helping myself when clearly I am, and look at this. I'm helping other people. And I'm just not going to give the gratification of them basically acting like it's my fault. I'm not going to tell them that. I don't know how to word it, actually. It's just not my fault. It's theirs, actually. Because their advice is not helpful to the situation I'm in. And it does require specific help, that's it, really. So again, like, it's powerful to have these words in your head. It's powerful to use them when you need them most. And it can probably even help with things like mourning. And I haven't sort of tried it yet, I don't want to be honest, but say you have gender dysphoria, try it with that, see if that helps. Because as it stands at the moment, I don't think transition is easy. It costs a lot of money, I think, and even if it's free, it's a long waiting list. But if you can somehow beat gender dysphoria with not giving it the gratification it wants, then good for you. I'm glad it helps, I guess. I didn't expect it to be honest, but yeah. there's just many different ways to tackle mental health, but you need to tap into the way to address it at the source, and not necessarily a one size fits all, because I'll admit this one won't help with everything. Still have global learning delays, I still have non-verbal autism, I still have issues with processing social situations and social cues and even jokes. And unfortunately, I can't use this advice to tackle it really. It's just something that's passively there. And you can't use it like, say, if you're an amputee. You can't just say to your stump, oh, I'm not going to give you the gratification you want. Because obviously it's not something that's an obstacle, it's just something that's there, unfortunately. But you can probably do something that surrounds it, like if it's causing you depression, you can use it for the depression. But again, it doesn't always work. That's the thing with mental health support, really. It has to be catered to the person, not the people, because the people are all going to be different, if that makes any sense. I'm just sick and tired of how trivialised it's become, and that's why I've taken action. That's why I've come up with this. That's only a few bits of advice, but it could mean a lot, really. Who knows? But it's powerful, and unfortunately, when people begin conflicting, like say, you're trying to insult each other, which I don't advise you do because insults are useless, and you both realise the same thing, that if you give them the gratification, then it's not going to help. Eventually, it just becomes nothingness. So that's all I have to talk about, really. That's the end of the speech. I think people learn from it and also can adapt from it as well, because it's probably something I haven't realised yet with that advice. There's definitely flaws, but there isn't much I can do to evolve it. It's very generalised, it's universal. So it's just for anything really. Chronic pain, people, the universe, as you know it. Well, the universe is a never ending despair. You don't know what's going to happen next, but if you give it that gratification of it just being despair, it being a void, and life being pointless, then I think you're going to do well. And also, like, just think about the hyperfixation I'm going through now as well, which is the same as last year. If I give the gratification that it wants, like losing my virginity, then yeah, that's not going to be good. Because I think I can be better, I can do better. And it's just one of those obstacles, really, that I now recognise. So I can just tell it to shut up and get on with my life, like walk around it. It's like I don't know, trying to think of an analogy. I guess it's like a real life spam mail. Like a guy hands out leaflets trying to get you to go onto some weird religion. You just walk past them, or you grab it, and then you tear it up. That's one way to fight it. It's actually pretty cool when I think about it. You have to break its spirits, maybe. Also, people, I think you need to do some education to some extent, hence why I'm doing this. So you can't just be like ignoring them all the time. You need to give people a reality check. And at least this advice can help people as well. Can be the reality check as well.